May I have your attention, please? Kindly be seated. May I request the chair and the speakers for the next session to kindly take their respective seats. As we begin the proceedings for the session on age of consent, developing a view of what is wrong, what is right, acceptable or unacceptable. The chair for this session is Dr. Rajesh Sagar, MD, PhD Honours, FAMS, FIMSA, Professor, Department of Psychiatry, All India Institute of Medical Science, AIIMS, New Delhi. The speakers are Shri Anant Ashana, Senior Advocate, New Delhi, Dr. Vilashini, Senior Lecturer, Gender Studies Program, University Malaya, Malaysia, Ms. Carolina Atencio, Lecturer and former Director of Institutional Relation, Ministry of Women, Gender and Diversity, Argentina, Dr. Madhumita Das, Feminist Researcher and Consultant, United Nations Population Fund, Regional Office, New Delhi. The chairs will be given 5 minutes each to make opening and closing remarks. The speakers for this session will get 10 to 12 minutes to make their presentation. This will be followed by a 15 minutes question and answer discussion moderated by the chair. I request the chair to kindly take the proceedings forward. Thank you.
Good morning everyone, and let me first thank Indian Council of World Affairs and all of you, and especially Nivedita and Nutan, and who have invited, and it's much I'm delighted to be here. I am a psychiatrist, and I look after mental health aspects, and also have a special interest with children and young population. So this topic is very apt, and the topic and we have wonderful speakers. So and because the topic is age of consent, developing a view on what is right or wrong, acceptable or unacceptable. I think a lot of debate is going on, and I would see that there is no better forum than this to discuss about this. And a lot of discussion already has taken place, and whether we should reduce the age, like right now in India, it's 18 years, whether to go to 16 years. In some countries, we know it's also 14 years. We, in fact, after reviewing, we came to know, and a lot of debate is there, and a lot of discussions are happening, but we have to see that and what is right or wrong, what is acceptable or unacceptable in that way. So that discussion is very, very important. I am sure all the speakers will address this issue, perhaps to see that how we can move forward, what are the way forward in this regard. And but at the same time, we have to see that what further policy can be made, whether we can modify it further. In fact, I have worked with the National Commission of Protection of Child Rights and Ministry, also Ministry of Women and Child, and in and lot of activities I have involved with the POXO and some of the acts which are there. So what is important is when we consider the age of consent, what the legal implications are. I think that way is very, very important, and of course we have a speaker who will deal with that. Then of course, then a certain what is important from what I can say from psychological perspective is the emotional maturity, the kind of the psychological aspect, that and also the balance of autonomy versus they are not exploited also. So we have to strike a balance there, and it is very crucial and important in that way. So with these few words, I think we can invite a speaker. Our first speaker is Shri Anant Ashana, and he is a senior advocate in Delhi, and I will just briefly talk about his detail. Just a minute. Session 6. Which page is this? Yeah, so great. So anyway, you have all the details in your folder, but it is honor to say a few words about Shri Anant Ashana Sahab. He is a child rights and criminal lawyer based at Delhi High Court. He is advisor to Delhi State Legal Services Authority on child justice related matter. He is also a member of the core group on children of National Human Rights Commission of India. His advocacy and work in and outside court spread over 15 years, has a considerable impact on laws, procedures, and practice in the sphere of child justice in India. In recognition of the value his judicial and legal work, Mr. Asthana was conferred Child Rights Champion, wonderful, award under the jurist category by Delhi Commission of Protection of Child Right in the year 2023. He is also a national acclaimed technical trainer and resource person for criminal laws and child rights laws. He collaborates with diverse range of institutions, individual and professional, to campaign for better appreciation of child justice in India. I think there is no better person than him, I can tell you, and to talk about this particular topic, which I feel is very sensitive and very, very important for us, country like India. Always I say, like India is a country where we have almost 42% of the population is below 18 years. I think that's a very, very important point what we all need to know, and what the young population is the highest in the world. In fact, we have surpassed China also. So that is why the responsibility is much more, always as a people who work with children are so important, that we are catering to such a huge population. So Mr. Asthana, please.
I'm grateful to Indian Council for World Affairs. Thank you. I'm very grateful to Indian Council for World Affairs for bringing all of us together and give us this opportunity to have this intellectual environment to discuss these issues, which of course are very important for India, but also have global implications because they affect the juridical landscape, particularly in Asia. Whatever happens here gets rolled out in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, right? So that's why I think this conversation is very important. Just a small correction that I'm not yet a senior advocate. I'm an advocate who has seniority in the field, but senior advocate is a designation which the constitutional courts grant. So it happens quite a lot that people do add senior advocate, but I must clarify that I'm not yet. With your blessings, I might become one day, but
You will become senior or
right. So age of consent. Let's be. I have to speak about how courts are dealing with it, the moral, the legal dimensions. But I want to just flag when we are talking about age of consent, we are talking about age of consent in two realms. One, age of consent within marriage, right? And age of consent outside marriage. Because our Indian law deals with both, and it has quite an impact on women. How these two, so age of consent we have to see within marriage and outside marriage. I want to start with the case which happened just 100 days after the POXO Act. The POXO Act is the national legislation which is at the core of the entire debate because it has increased and fixed the age of consent at 18 years, right? And there is a lot of anxiety around it. What is that anxiety? I'll tell you. There was a judge, a POXO judge in Delhi. His name was Dharmesh Sharma. He later on became a judge of a constitutional court in Delhi, Delhi High Court judge. He retired recently. He was also picked up by the Supreme Court to do a trial of a POXO case in Hathras gang rape case. The Supreme Court picked him and gave him the special. Now, he had dealt with the case just 100 days after the POXO Act came. Now, I'll just read out some parts from what he did in that case. 22-year-old man I don't know whether to call him boy or man, but 22-year-old, married a girl who was 15 years and 4 months. The parents of the girl lodged FIR saying that my daughter has gone missing. After a few days, both of them were recovered, and the boy said, listen, I have not run away, I have not kidnapped. Me and this girl are in love, we have married. But I have not gone into sexual intercourse with her yet. But the girl, on the contrary, also said the same thing to the magistrate, said that on my own, I have decided to marry this man because I feel that my life will be safe with this man. I want to make him my husband, and I had sex with him, right? Now the judge dealt with this question, and the public prosecutor of this case made a very important observation at that time, which has been recorded. I'll read that out. The public prosecutor at that time, when the POXO Act was, the law on POXO was still not developed, only 100 days. POXO Act came on 14th November 2012, and this case is of February 2013. The public prosecutor representing Delhi State said, and I quote, the much has been urged by the learned public prosecutor for the state that the mandate of the POXO Act is that no one, including a married man, can have sexual intercourse with a child below the age of 18 years. Right? That's a submission of the state. And it also shows the intent why this law was created. The law was created so that no man could have sex with anybody, no man or woman or any gender can have sex with any person who is below the age of 18 years. POXO Act is gender neutral. Now, the judge, the trial court just said, I'm afraid I'm not impressed. That's the POXO court just said. I'm afraid I'm not impressed. Right? It shows that the judiciary from the very beginning could not be on the same table in terms of understanding. Soon after. Now, this view, which the learned public prosecutor has taken and the trial court judge rejected, became law of the land in 2017, when Justice Madan Lokur and Justice Deepak Gupta, both celebrated for their contribution in the field of child rights, they said exactly what the learned public prosecutor said in the Independent Thought versus Union of India judgment. You see that judgment in the first para itself. They said, doesn't matter marriage or not, any sexual intercourse with a minor amounts to rape. Now this is what the PP said, and the judge disagreed. Why the judge disagreed? I'll read that out. The judge said that, listen, the offense which this man is alleged is sexual assault. And then he says that I don't find any element of assault in this. There is no assault happening here. Everything is consensual, everything is happy. Where is the assault? So I will not convict. So he convicted the boy for enticing a minor girl out of a lawful guardianship, but he said I will not convict the man for sexual assault. Now this view from 2013 to 2017, the lower judiciary, I gave you an example of how the lower judiciary looked at it, and then in 2017 the Supreme Court looked at it and held a view. Now with the Independent Thought judgment, the discretion which the lower judiciary had in terms of age of discretion, the Varadarajan judgment in 1965 created something called age of discretion, and it allowed judiciary to protect what we call today consensual, non-exploitative sexual relation. It's a new term, no? These days, this term is used. Factually consensual and non-exploitative sexual activity. So a lot of adolescents, 16, 17, below 18, when they enter into a sexual activity, with a man, whether it's a minor or adult. The term used these days is factually consensual and non-exploitative sexual activity. Now, this activity was protected by the trial court judges because of the Varadarajan judgment. Varadarajan judgment is 1965, where they have said it was in the context of kidnapping of a minor. And the Supreme Court said that, listen, taking away a minor and allowing a minor to come along are two different things. We treat both of them differently. One has a criminality, other doesn't have criminality. So we will treat both them differently. An age of discretion was invented. Now that age of discretion has gone completely out of the discussion. Now you will not find anybody discussing age of discretion. So I want to take this opportunity to bring your attention back to the jurisprudence on age of discretion. Age of consent we are definitely looking at. Now I move little bit into age of consent. In 1889, a girl named Fulmani Das died. Right? Now her death led to an enactment of a law. In 1891 was called Age of Consent Act. 1891. India was not an independent country at that time. We were a British colony. So we were governed by the age of. Now why Age of Consent Act was enacted was because Fulmani died. When Fulmani died, the political environment was that the leaders like Bal Gangadhar Tilak and all, they were opposing that no foreigner will interfere in our personal matters. These are family law matters. Hindus have their own views, Muslims have their own views. We will not allow any foreign power to legislate on our personal affairs. So nobody dared to do that. And Bal Gangadhar Tilak, you know how influential leader he was. Nobody, but the Fulmani's death created that kind of emotional and moral discomfort that you allow an 11-year-old girl to die because of the marital rape by a 35-year-old man.
Shri Asthana ji, I have been told 2 to 3 minutes
yes.
left. Yeah.
And the courts have to say, sorry, we can't convict this man. Right now, that kind of moral guilt led into creation of this law. It broke the bureaucratic lethargy which was there, and the hesitation also in moving forward with a law which will protect women. So I just brought up this case of Fulmani's because the Fulmani's case has been mentioned by the Supreme Court recently in October 2024 when they were dealing with the question of marriage, the child marriage. So that case, even till date, it continues. Now, the view, I'll just conclude in a minute. The view which was taken by the trial court judge in 2013 in Delhi. Now, a contrary view was taken by the Supreme Court in 2017 by Justice Madan Lokur and by Justice Deepak Gupta. But then soon after 8 months, you will read it that in my abstract, soon after 8 months, another bench, Justice Abhay Oka and Justice Ujjwal Bhuyan, they said, listen, we have this girl whom state is saying that they are victim of sexual offense, but the girl is saying, listen, I'm not a victim. I have married, now there is a man, I have a child. So what we see is a victim which has been created by the system and the laws, and we will not allow any person to go to jail. So again, within 8 months, the Supreme Court said the same thing which the trial court just said in 2013 as a majority view. Even the trial courts are not having any binding capacity, but these issues are constantly troubling the judiciary, the police, Indian Law Commission. If you want to do further study into it, the Indian Law Commission has just concluded its report on in 2023 based on 2 recommendations by the 2 different constitutional courts. One is the Karnataka High Court and the other is the Madhya Pradesh High Court. Both of them wrote to Law Commission saying that, listen, there are these cases which are coming. We see that we are disturbing lives of people. We see the people who are going to jail. We don't feel happy about it. we are making this reference, and the Law Commission has made a reference which I will just quote and conclude. Now the Law Commission said two recommendations. Law Commission has said, Commission is of the measured view that it is not advisable to tinker with the existing age of consent. So no reduction. Law Commission has said no reduction. Don't bring down the age from 18 to 16, because that will also take away lots of protections which are anyway available to minor victims of sexual offences. But they have said that the Commission considers it necessary that the certain amendments need to be brought into the POCSO Act. That's where we are. The Law Commission of India is a very potent institution. Everybody reads what they write. Their processes are very elaborate, very consultative. As a country, we are engaged with this discussion. We don't know where we are going to, but this is what in nutshell, in 10 minutes, I can present what's happening in our courts. As of now, our courts are taking this approach of go case by case basis. And I think most of the law practitioners are also taking this view also, that in a given case, you protect the person, right? The law change might happen, might not happen. In which direction it will go, we don't know. But it's a very fascinating enterprise which is happening. And I invite all of you to join this conversation. Thank you very much for having me.
So thank you, Shri Astana Saab. Thank you. I think those of you may know that a very beautiful abstract is there in the booklet. If you want to go through, you can go through. So yes, because we have to cut short because time is important. Our next speaker is Dr. Vilashini Somiah, and she will speak online. Just few words. Is she there online now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Can we have Dr. Vilashini on the screen, please?
Yes. So,
Ma'am, kindly share your PPT with us.
Sure.
The chair will let you know the time to start.
Yeah. She's a feminist anthropologist, specialization in Malaysia and Greater Borneo. And she is a senior lecturer, Gender Studies Program, University of Malaya, Malaysia. Wonderful. We have an international colleague now. And so that will add a flavor to this whole symposium right now. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you very much, dear Chairperson. I appreciate it. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Thank you. And can you see my slides? Are the slides viewable?
Yeah, we can see your slides. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, everybody. And it's such an honor to be speaking with all of you. I apologize. I cannot be with you right now in beautiful Delhi. But perhaps the future might offer something new. My name is Vilashini Somiah, and yeah, you're not wrong. That's an Indian name. I come from Malaysia. My mother is of indigenous descent from the island of Borneo, but my father is of Tamil descent. So I guess that explains the name. So it's really nice to be speaking to cousins digitally all the way in India. And I hope this conversation lends a little bit of a lens in which we can think around this whole notion of consent. I think when we do talk about consent, there's a very important provocation that we need to start with, which is consent is often presented as this entire notion of just yes and no. But really, at the end of the day, binary really crumbles under the weight of power, law, religion, and culture. So I think the conversation that I'd like to lead today is not so much a conversation about legality. While that is important, is that we have to interrogate the ways in which societies define autonomy, control, and most certainly what we think an adult is. Because as you heard from the first speaker, you may be legally an adult, but you're certainly not thinking through things very intelligently. So, really to start with, I think this whole conversation is about looking at consent beyond binaries. And, consent is certainly not a line to be crossed, but a landscape shaped by power, because the ways in which we can speak about consent is flavored by the different kinds of privileges that all of us in this room today share. So I think the at least in the work that I do in the sort of feminist anthropology space, is that we're constantly talking about how it is at the age of consent can often be reduced to the legal numbers. Now, before you come at me to say, well, obviously these numbers are very important, I'm here to sort of inform you that consent is also deeply tied to power, to control, bodily autonomy, this notion of justice and inequality. So if we're constantly hung up about the numbers when it comes to consent, or at least the legal age of it, we're missing the larger context behind the binary issues of consent. And today's presentation, at least what I'm trying to say is that we're reframing, or at least I'm trying to reframe consent as a political and intersectional issue, which is not just legal. Now, if we want to define consent, I think we have to define the terrain looking beyond the law. And that ultimately the age of consent is often tied to the legal thresholds for permissible or sexual activities. But a larger thing to that is that there's an implication to the ripples that go far beyond the legality, which is what I've been trying to say, because it shapes the way we talk about bodily autonomy. It shapes this notion of decision making. And it really reflects ultimately, if any of you have been to Southeast Asia, where I come from in Malaysia, it reflects state power, patriarchal control, and multiple issues around social inequalities. And I think South Asia is no alien to those conversations, right? So in places like South Asia or Southeast Asia, or greater parts of the majority worlds, I try not to use the word global South because it's so easy to just draw a line across the globe, right? And it's much more complex than that. These dynamics are particularly visible in intersections of course, gender, class, in some places and in communities that I come from, which is a taboo word to mention: caste, colorism, migration, and certainly indigeneity. And these are just some intersections. There are many more that I'm not picking up on. I want to sort of share with you some of the Malaysian legal frameworks that helps us define things. In Malaysia, of course, and I don't think it's too different from what it is in India, is that rape is essentially sexual intercourse without consent or against any form of will. And that is how we frame rape in this country. In Malaysia, particularly, statutory rape is sex with a girl under the age of 16, regardless of consent. So a 15-year-old may have consented to having sex with somebody of the same age or older. It is still seen as statutory rape. Sexual assault, which is different from that, is any sort of sexual contact without consent. And so there are laws that sort of criminalizes acts like outrage of modesty, right? That is just everyday language for molestation, penetration with objects, and etc. So I guess the key point here is that if one is under 16, of course, consent is legally impossible, but the power dynamics essentially still exist. Now, just to give you a little bit of an idea of what's essentially happening around Southeast Asia, in the Philippines, they raised the age of consent from 12 to 16, I believe sometime around the pandemic. But enforcement continues to remain weak. And enforcement even in Malaysia is also weak. Yeah, I just need to be honest about that, especially in rural areas. In Indonesia, I believe the minimum age of marriage is 19. But just like Malaysia, child marriage persists through the religious courts. And in a country where there are so many Muslim citizens, the religious courts has its own position around it, right? So again, age really doesn't matter at the end of the day because there's another governing body that decides this. In Thailand, the age of consent is 15, but marriage under 17 requires parental and court approval. So what I'm trying to share is that there continues to be multiple inconsistencies when it comes to talking about these kind of ages of consent, even as a collective in something like Southeast Asia. So consent essentially goes hand in hand with, as we all know, bodily integrity. And what is bodily integrity? It is the inherent right to make a decision about one's own body. So children, particularly adolescents, they lack that legal autonomy, but their moral rights remain. And I think if we are constantly engaging in this conversation, we see the way in this is that there's a constant clash of opinions and philosophies around this. And when it comes to informed consent, and I have to mention this, is that even in the medical world, one can be medically, sexually, and socially lacking when it comes to sort of informed consent. The context around that needs to be examined. And when you are denied bodily autonomy, you are essentially complicit to the facilitating of any form of exploitation. So we have to speak about consent together with this whole notion of bodily integrity and body autonomy. Let's talk about the elephant in the room here. We're talking about consent because really what we're talking about is child marriage. And there are massive contradictions around this. Child marriage is often circumvents the age of consent laws, particularly in a country like Malaysia. But we see child marriages in so many parts of the Asian world, in the African world, right? So girls may be legally married, but essentially they lack any agency, even over their own body. There are obviously economic pressures, there's patriarchal norms, and there is, which is the problem that I think that was brought up by the first speaker, judicial loopholes that override any form of protection for children. So again, even if we're going around saying, well, we have the age of consent that makes sense to us, this is not happening outside of that legally speak. In Malaysia, we see 1,500 child marriages recorded between pre-pandemic till a little after post-pandemic. We believe these numbers are larger today. So, what are we saying about statutory rape? Is it protection or is it paternalism? Are people, even children, people underage, able to sort of communicate and talk about these things in a way that help us understand better? Because essentially, statutory rape laws intend to protect minors. We know this, but they can also police sexuality. And I think this is where we also go into this whole notion of looking at children as sexual beings. There's a need to protect them from this, but we don't expand that conversation to also understand why it is that children fall into this trap. So there's a disproportionate enforcement against poor migrant and minority youth. Imagine if one is a gay migrant youth. There's essentially no position to protect them at all. And it often fails to prosecute perpetrators in positions of power. We see this in places that are incredibly corrupt. So survivors can essentially face criminalization in the worst cases. And social killing is that they are shamed. So what are the marginalized realities around consent? Well, we have to read it in context. If you're talking about undocumented and stateless persons, Malaysia hosts about 3 to 5 million stateless people. Is that you have a fear of sort of reporting?
Dr. Vilashini, 2 to 3 minutes, yeah.
Got it? Yeah. Disabled individuals have barriers to informed consent. Indigenous youth have limited legal literacy. And essentially, context in this consent in this context is incredibly layered and fraught with politics. I want to mention very quickly this whole notion. If any of you are doctors in the room, I'm very sorry. This is not an attack on the medical world, but I think also that medical decisions are often made for vulnerable populations, not by them. And this, again, leads to many kinds of structural inequalities and legal paternalism, which leads to violation of bodily autonomy. So I think the point I'm trying to get here is that consent becomes weaponized. Age of consent laws are sometimes used against those to protect, of course, but essentially we see the criminalizing of adolescent sexuality. We see the deporting of migrant survivors instead of prosecuting their abusers, and you silence many disabled victims through capacity arguments. So when we talk about the law, is the law protecting, and if they are, from whom? I'm going to move past this because this has been mentioned already. So lastly, I think what I want to talk about here is that when we talk about the age of consent, we want to move towards justice, but I think policies are greatly lacking. And in Malaysia, of course, we talk about raising the minimum age of marriage and expanding legal definitions. But ultimately, it's because we don't develop intersectional legal reforms for many different kind of marginalized groups, which is why we cannot have a holistic conversation about the age of consent. So my summary and my takeaways for today is that the age of consent is really not about it just being about the legalese of things. It's deeply political. Bodily autonomy must remain central in this argument. The structural inequalities shape how consent is given, denied, and in this particular presentation, weaponized. And I encourage everybody in the room to help be a part of the reimagining of what we mean by consent, because it means shifting powers. It means dismantling the patriarchy. It sounds so simple. It really isn't. And it's really about centering justice for people who really need the justice in this notion of consent. I thank all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Will. we all are clapping for you. I hope you can hear the noise.
I can feel it in my heart. Thank you.
So maybe you can be there for some time. We'll take a question at the end of all when all speaker finish. So wonderful talk. Thank you so much. Now we come to the third speaker, and Miss Carolina Atencio, lecturer and former director of Institutional Relations, Ministry of Women, Gender and Diversity from Argentina. Oh, wonderful. So one of the farthest place, I think you are. Yeah. So welcome to India and Delhi. So we'll like to hear from you and from different continent altogether. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Distinguished colleagues, esteemed panelists, members of the Indian Council of World Affairs, and all those present today. First of all, I want to thank the ICWA for this invitation and for creating a space to reflect collectively on such an important topic. It is an honor for me to be here representing Argentina in a space where we are invited to think across geographies, traditions, and legal frameworks in the search for greater equality. I would like to begin with a simple idea. Consent is not a number. It is not only about whether a girl is 14, 16, or 18. Consent is shaped by power, by culture, by the expectations we place on girls and boys from a very young age. True consent is not only about the possibility of saying a free, informed, and enthusiastic yes. It is about building the social conditions that allow women to say no and to stay alive, to be safe and to be heard when we do so. It is about living in societies where a woman's refusal is not a provocation, a challenge, or a threat, but simply a decision, where women can choose whom to love, what to wear, and what to do with their bodies, and how to live their lives without fear of punishment, shame, or violence. Because consent, at its core, it is not an individual act. It is a collective promise of equality. Consent is often defined in legal codes as a chronological boundary. Below a certain age, you cannot consent, above it you can. But reality, as we have actually been discussing in this conference, is far more complex. For consent to be real, not theoretical, not symbolic, but real, 4 conditions must exist: freedom, information, capacity, and above all, equality. And it's on this last one that I want to focus, because equality is what makes all the other possible. Without equality, freedom becomes fear, information becomes silence, and capacity becomes permission granted by others. Equality is the ground on which consent stands. Without it, a yes is never truly free. We know that young women's voices are often silenced, infantilized, or discredited. For centuries, women and girls have been denied the power to consent to their own lives because they were seen as daughters, wives, or mothers, always under someone else's authority. That authority has always had a man's name and a man's face. And although the forms have changed at some point, that logic still persists today in the classroom, in the workplace, in politics, and even in our most intimate relationships. Women and girls are still expected to adapt, to please, and to justify their decisions in ways that men are not. The struggle for real autonomy is far from over. In Argentina today, the legal age of consent is 16. Child marriage is prohibited, and early unions are increasingly challenged as a form of gender-based violence and the violation of rights, of course. The law seeks to balance protection and autonomy, yet it remains meaningless if it fails to reflect young people's realities. And this brings us to one of the central dilemmas: how to protect without overprotecting, and how to recognize young people's rights without exposing them to harm. In patriarchal societies, this dilemma always ends up working against young women. They are simultaneously seen as too young to decide, and yet blamed when abuse occurs. They are expected to carry the burden of avoiding risk, while boys are encouraged to take initiative, to conquer, and to read consent as availability rather than mutual agreement. We must question these double standards. A girl may have reached the legal age to say yes, but power imbalance can compromise her ability to freely and genuinely consent. At the core of this discussion lies the need to question the deep gender inequalities that shape our understanding of consent. Gender norms still dictate who is believed, who is blamed, and whose desire is seen as legitimate. If we fail to challenge these hierarchies, we risk reproducing the same structures of domination that make true consent impossible. Recognizing and dismantling gender inequality is therefore not an addition to the debates, it is its very foundation. But gender inequality is not only symbolic, it is also and above all material. In Argentina and in many parts of the world, girls and young women are still expected to assume caregiving roles from a very early age. They look after siblings, elder relatives, or even become mothers themselves as teenagers. According to UNFPA, Latin America and the Caribbean remain the region with the highest rates of adolescent pregnancy in the world after sub-Saharan Africa. UNICEF data shows that more than 22% of girls in the region have their first sexual experience before the age of 15. These are not isolated statistics. These are the material face of inequality. Across the region, early motherhood continues to be one of the main causes of school dropouts among girls from low-income households. These are the same girls who, in addition to studying and working, take on care responsibility at home. These unpaid responsibilities, the actual heart of gender inequalities, limit their access to education, social life, and economic independence. Poverty, lack of access to education, and economic dependency shape who is truly free to choose. In many contexts, what we call consent take place in situations of need, scarcity, and exchange. In those scenarios, a young girl's yes might mean survival rather than desire. When basic rights like education, housing, or healthcare are not guaranteed, autonomy becomes a privilege, not a universal condition. The picture is actually clear. The intersection between gender and class produces a double vulnerability. Being young and being poor makes the path to autonomy much harder. That is why talking about consent, and also and particularly, means talking about redistribution of time, of care, and of resources. Without social protection, public health, and quality education, the right to consent remains abstract. Class, like gender, defines whose voice counts, whose body is protected, and whose future is in danger. Argentina has a long and powerful feminist tradition that has profoundly shaped our democracy, but it wasn't always this way. Not so long ago, Argentine women were legally considered to have fewer civil capacities than men, unable to administer their own property, sign contracts, or make decisions without a husband authorization. The equality we conquered was not given, it was won. For decades, women's and feminist movements have mobilized across the country, from the National Women's Gathering that have been in place since the 1980s, to the historic Ni Una Menos demonstration that have spread across the globe, and the Green Tide that demanded legal abortion. These struggles not only changed our culture, they also transformed the states, leading to ministries, gender policies, and a broad legal framework to reduce inequalities and fight against violence. One of the most transformative achievements in Argentina has been the implementation of comprehensive sexual education, CSE in English, ESI as we broadly know it in my country. Far from being limited to biology or contraception, ESI is a feminist and right-based policy that teaches young people about autonomy, respect, diversity, and crucially, consent. It has changed the way entire generations talk about their bodies, relationships, and gender. Although its implementation remains uneven among sectors and territories, of course, its impact is undeniable. Building on that foundation, the National Program for the Prevention of Unintended Adolescent Pregnancy, ENIA as we know it, works with healthcare providers, schools, and communities to expand access to contraception, counseling, and comprehensive support. Together, these policies have led to a remarkable reduction in teenage pregnancies over the last decade, showing what happens when the state takes autonomy and equality seriously. These policies show that consent cannot be separated from education and health. Without information and access to resources, consent risks becoming an empty word. However, Argentina is today facing a conservative backlash that threatens these hard-won achievements. A right-wing government has come to power denying the existence of gender inequalities and gender-based violence, while dismantling institutions and defounding policies that took decades to build. The danger is clear. When the state withdraws its political will and resources, the promise of equality becomes fragile. Without a sustained public commitment, girls and women, especially those in vulnerable situations, are condemned to live with less freedom, fewer choices, and greater exposure to violence. Defending these policies is not about preserving programs or defending a particular government. It is about protecting lives, dignity, and the future of the democracy itself. As I was traveling here, I kept thinking about what lessons a country like Argentina could bring to this global conversation. I believe those lessons could be summarized in three main ideas. First, that setting an age is necessary, of course, but it's not enough. Protection without autonomy infantilizes. Autonomy without protection exposes to exploitation. Real progress requires both. The freedom to decide and the safety to do so.
2 minutes, please. 2 minutes,
Yes,
yeah.
I will finish right away. Second, that laws alone are never enough. They must be supported by public policies that make rights real. Without social protection in place, rights remains aspirations rather than realities. And third, that none of this is possible without the strength of the feminist movements and young people themselves. In Argentina, they have been the driving force behind our most transformative changes. Without that social energy, even the best laws would remain just words on paper. As we share our experience here in the Congress, what becomes clear is that the challenges we face are deeply connected, whether in Latin America, Asia, Africa, or Europe. Patriarchal structures take different shapes but produce the same inequalities. That is why spaces like these matter so much, because they allow us to learn from each other, to build bridges, and to imagine new ways of protecting freedom and equality together. Our struggles might seem local, but our fight is global. May this dialogue remind us that we are not alone, that our voices resonate beyond borders, and that equality will always be a collective journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think wonderful. I think you came up with the Argentina experience. I think what we know that some of the issues cut across whole world. In fact, that is very important. And some of the key word, what you said, equality, and how we can look at this bridge and how we can connect it to each other. I think that's very, very important. So we come to the last but not the least speaker, that is Dr. Madhumita Das, who is a consultant at UNFPA Regional Office, New Delhi. I'm sure you will know UNFPA is working in a great deal. In fact, we were also part of some of the activities earlier with the adolescent mental health program and all. So the perspective would be very important. The title is Consent, Culture and Control, Revisiting India's Age of Consent Debate. Please, Dr. Madhumita Das.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to ICWA for inviting me to talk on this controversial topic. First of all, I want to put it on record. My presentation is my own view. It has nothing to do with UNFPA. I'm just working with them in a piece of assignment. So that's really important for me to put it on record. While a lot have been talked in this session, What I'm going to bring here is basically how India's age of consent law intersect with culture, morality. I want to specify that word, gender norms and adolescent rights. We will be looking at this entire phenomena of legal age to the deeper power structure and social dynamics, basically bringing in the perspective of consent, control, morality, and culture. Let's look at how we define age at consent. And I'm doing it. I know that this has been done, but I want to specify some of the words here. The age at which a person is legally recognized as capable of agreeing to sexual activity. I really wanted to emphasize the word capable, as we are talking about everyone below the age of 18. This debate reflects societal judgment about morality, maturity, and protection, highlighting the tension between protecting young people and restricting their autonomy. The question that comes here is, whose interests are being protected? Is it the adolescents? Is it the families? Or is it the state? Anand have talked about the very famous case about Fulmanidasi. I'm not going to get into it, but 2 points here, which is really important for me to raise here, is at that point of time, when the age of consent was being increased, our national leaders was against it because it was intersecting with culture. Now, what is happening at this point of time when we are in the 21st century, we know it is going on the different or the opposite direction. While POCSO Act came into being, it actually emphasized criminalizing all sexual activity of young people under the age of 18 years. It is denting one of the very important phenomena, which is it mandated reporting by all health providers if anybody who comes for any services related to sexual and reproductive health, that has to be reported. And that's where the criminalization word comes in. And where is the problem then? This includes compulsory reporting of pregnant adolescent as victim of sexual abuse. So everybody, every person under the age of 18 years, if they come for any services under sexual and reproductive health, then that is considered as a victim of sexual abuse. Now let's get into the debate. I think all of us, we talked about a lot of debate, and there are a couple of things which is very much in a debatable status. The debate over the age of consent in India is more than a legal question. So it sits at the intersection, as I said, on gender, culture, colonial legacy, and state control over sexuality. Anyone, as I mentioned about anyone under the age of 18 is classified as child, making the consent to sexual act legally irrelevant. So we are talking about everybody, every adolescent who is 17 years, 11 months, 364 days, right? And they get into any of the sexual relationship is legally invalid or not possible. But when that same person the next day cut the cake of celebrating 18 years, that's everything is valid at then. The discussion also talks on the burden on families and the judiciary, because there are a lot of the cases which are false cases as well, or cases because of taking revenge on each other. The question here is, are we addressing harm or reinforcing patriarchal control? I think a lot of my previous speakers did talk about it across different region or different continent. Now let's get into the debate on consent versus control. Whose consent counts? the question that I have already asked. At the heart of the debate around the age of consent lies a struggle over who gets to decide when a young person is capable of making choices about their own body and relationship. Too often, the law prioritizes the authority of parents and the state over the autonomy of adolescents themselves. Many of these laws are rooted in patriarchal notion of protecting girls, honor rather than respecting their evolving capacity to make informed choices instead of empowering young people. They frequently reinforce the idea that girls must be shielded. The concept of honor in majority of the family is so strong, and I'm talking mostly about India. I know that that is across different communities across the globe, that honor becomes a predominant phenomena for any decision about the body that we are carrying. Now let's talk about the morality. The debate around age of consent also comes from a very moral content, because it is many cases formed as sexual activity within marriage is acceptable. So the morality is, even if goes beyond 18 years, and predominantly we also hear a lot about any girl getting into sexual relationship before marriage is not acceptable. It doesn't actually cut also the law which talks about below 18 years. So the morality actually continues beyond the law, which is 18 years, and restricts all the freedom of mostly the women and the girls, because that particular body of woman is being honored to the family, to the community, to the state as well. Religion also reinforces this. Most of the religion comes and talks about sex within marriage, and also shielded all the provocation, all the ideas and the norms that actually restricts young people to form their own relationship, or have a choice about their partner. But unfortunately, if we look at the ancient Indian texts such as the Kama Sutra, along with temple sculpture and poetry, celebrated desire and sexuality as natural aspects of life. We might have forgotten that. Law and morality. While the law often recognizes as individuals' capacity to consent, especially once they reach the age of consent, prevailing moral attitude can continue to stigmatize consensual relationship. In many communities, even when two people willingly engage in a relationship that is legally permissible, families and society may still label the relationship as illicit. Purity culture plays a very big role in our family, as well as in every aspect of our life. Adolescents, especially girls, often face additional barriers because parental and community approval can overshadow their rights. So how does it impact and how it is impacting? There are a couple of studies that I have referred here in my presentation. The first one is by UNICEF and the partner, and it brings about the cases around which is more often called as romantic cases. And the highlight of those cases are from Assam, Maharashtra, and West Bengal, where the authors actually did a lot of in-depth studies about each of the cases, and it connects with the elopement. Now the question here is, when we talk about these cases, we mostly highlight why girls have eloped, what is going to be harmful in those particular relationship, but we often forget to ask question about why are they actually leaving their parental house. And it is because a lot of those relationships are very much abandoned or been restricted by family or the community, or it is like the ultimate consent for and the choice for marriages are always being by the parents and the families. So in those conditions, when the young girl or the young boy falls into a very understanding, very suitable relationship, they often take this decision to elope because there is no other way of continuing those relationships. And we know that these cases get more extreme when we talk about interreligion or intercaste marriages. The second study is by International Human Rights Advisory Council, which talks about the misuse of the POCSO Act. And in many cases, as I said, that there are a lot of those cases which,
Madhumita,
yeah,
2 to 3 minutes.
A lot of cases are about taking revenge against the families or against the communities. I'll just skip this. This is more around how it impacts on the criminalization. And the cases that I have highlighted are basically denial of services or delaying the services to the girls who went for the services, health services, because the authorities are more engaged to find out whether she is less than 18 or above 18. My last slide, the age of consent remains a contested and culturally embedded concept. While grounded in the legitimate need to protect young people from harm, legal framework must also recognize adolescents' evolving capacities and right to bodily autonomy. India's current legal regime under POCSO reflects a strictly protectionist approach that risks criminalization, consensual adolescent sexuality. Future policy reform should consider nuanced approaches. And one of the, I think the previous author had talked about, which is now, not valid in India, is the comprehensive sexuality education, because we also have problem around providing comprehensive sexuality education, because it gives information about safe sex, contraceptive use. So I think those are really important to ensure that our adolescents, our young people know what is safe sex and how they can protect their own bodies, even if they are into a relationship which is consensual. We must shift from criminalization to empowerment, protecting adolescent health, choice, and dignity. Thank you so much.
Fine. So I think it was treat to listen to all 4 speakers. I am sorry that we have to cut short the time because time was the important factor. But the most important point was that you will all agree that we have from different diverse background the speakers were, and talking about different aspects and even from different countries also. And one thing which was common, that the issues are pertinent to almost all countries, more so low and middle income countries and so on. So time is short, so I have been told that we can have 5-minute discussion, so we can spend some time before we wind up this session. So any question or any comment anyone would like to have, please go ahead. If you want to address to any specific speaker, you can let us know.
Carolina. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Nupur Ray. I'm a faculty at the Department of Political Science, Kamla Nehru College, University of Delhi. I have a question and perhaps a reiteration that I want to make with Carolina here, that we are, as all of you, and especially you are speaking in terms of more power hierarchies and intersections of power hierarchies with consent, and also the social conditioning and the norms and the expectations. In India, we are also now engaging and reflecting on the ideas of toxic masculinities and also interrogating the construction of masculinities, the ideas around men will be men, and the certain way that boys are raised about. So again, just to reiterate that the entire discourse cannot be just about how we raise girls and the informed consent about how we make them understand, but also to constantly reiterate that how we also need to engage boys and men in these conversations, and perhaps also make them understand around dignity, around human body, the integrity. So yes, also a reiteration of involving men in the discourse and discussion.
I think it's on. Yes, now it's on. Thank you. Actually, as I will paraphrase our friend here from Malaysia that is online, she was talking about an elephant on the table, and I think that the other elephant over the table is that if men are not involved, anything of this discussion is actually meaningful, you know. So in Argentina, for instance, we have lots of programs regarding masculinities, and I have to be very honest with you. I don't know if I would be saying this in Argentina, but here I can. They are very difficult to implement, and it is because for many years we have believed that feminism has to do with female, and that is actually a huge mistake. So we are trying to improve our policies in that way. So it's that important. It's as important for men to be involved. Actually, I'm very happy to see many men here in the room. I hope they will participate as much as we are today. But thank you for bringing that into the conversation, because actually it's the other elephant over the table.
Thank you. Even the panel, we have two men. So yeah. so there is a balance there. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, please. So we can have one more. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So I am Dr. Judith from Christ University. I teach political science and international relations. I think this has been a very vibrant panel where we are looking at consent from legal perspective, from political as well as the moral aspect. So I think one of the things that has been coming up is about how we are defining consent in terms of law, morality. But another thing that we are experiencing in the Indian context, as I think that is in a way not mentioned in the conversations that we've been having here, is on the rising of honor killings in India. I think that is also one of the important ways in which we are looking at how the law is being misused. Also, how that change in mindset is something that has not really been come across. Because I think the previous speaker, Dr. Vilashini, had also talked about the idea of intersectionality. So in the Indian context, we see that how caste is something that is, and even religion, is something that how, because of these specific positioning of power hierarchy that is functioning in these specific areas, and how the control of girls and women is actually taking place, and that is also leading to the rise in honor killings in India. And I think this is something that has to be taken up, looking at politics, intersectionality in law, morality in that lens. Secondly, with the rise of social media platforms, I think the feminist movement have always discussed the idea that, patriarchy is not just affecting women, but it is also affecting men. So I think this is a trajectory, and I think one of the prominent figures in the Indian context has been Kamala Bhasin, who is no more, who has actually led this entire discourse or debate, feminist debate on, how patriarchy is also affecting men. So I think much more needs to be done. We moved ahead, but then we are also facing the challenge of social media and the rise of pornographic content that is there. And therefore that is leading to, toxic masculinity, and how even girls are falling for that. And how young girls specifically, are also internalizing these things. So I think much more needs to be done in terms of trainings, in terms of how law is looking at all of this, and how we can actually build more debates and discourses around it. Going down to the schools, maybe more to colleges, is something that has to be looked at. Yeah.
Fine. I think those are very, very pertinent comments. I think, and personally, I agree with what all you have said. And these are some of the important issues we need to dwell on. In fact, what I would say a step ahead, like we as a group, we need to work on all these which are country specific, which are our own cultural related issues. One of them is honor killing. Yes, I agree. Like even for child marriage, which is there, which is, not so much in the developed world as such. So some of those issues which are important of this region, where some of those, so I think that the work should continue as a group, as a whole, and bridging the gap and looking at what the solutions can come up in the future. Before I end, any of the speaker would like to say anything? Last word? Yeah. Just one. Yeah.
Good.
Just
Just a few small things. Yes, I definitely agree. This new phenomena of honor killing, and I think that is beyond age of consent. This is like at any age, if you cross the line is defined by your caste, religion, and other intersectionalities. That's actually is taking a lot of pressure on many young people. I acknowledge the toxic masculinity aspect, but as you said, the pornography, the social media, I think first of all, we need to put all the fingers to ourselves and raise boys from a very different perspective. The understanding of power starts from the family, not from what they see in social media, and how this entire concept of if you are not powerful, if you are not aggressive, you are not man, actually are defined by us. I think we as parents, as elders, we need to really change our course of work and dealing with young people from a very different perspective. Yes, social media actually adds to it, and then make it like a different picture altogether. Thank you so much.
Fine, thank you. So I will just end up, instead of 5 minutes, I will take only 1 minute now as a chair. I think it was a wonderful panel. Let us give a big hand to all the speakers here. Also online speaker Vilashini, and it was treat to listen to all of them. And you want to say, okay, please go ahead, Dr. Vilashini. You are muted.
Opportunity today. I think it's fantastic. I'm very sorry I could not see the first speaker. I wasn't there for the earlier conversation, but Dr. Judith, you've got my haircut, so I think we're hanging out in the same camp. I agree that there's a conversation about men that we have not honored in this conversation. I mean, a play on honor killing, certainly. And you're absolute, and I think both our questions here were absolutely right. Consent is not an issue that's coming from the women's corner. It's relational to certainly every other mention here. I think the continuum between consent and honor killing is a very important issue around moral policing, because it's an expression of patriarchal control. I understand in places like South Asia, it is a much more prevalent issue because the language around honor killing in Southeast Asia has just turned into what it is legally. It is just called patriarchal murder. And I think this is essentially the big issue that we have not raised, because I think missing from today's panel is that men have to be allies, and there are male who are allies, there are men who are allies, and we tend to overlook this constantly. So I want to also thank the two men that have been on the panel. Certainly, I understand both of you are allies as well, but I don't think we are pairing the conversation around consent and the age of consent with alliance and justice. So I just want to end it there. Hopefully one day I'll get to come back to see all my cousins in India. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, so I think the issues, I think this, the important thing is this is a very important area, and was glad to see the interest of all of you, and many there would be some questions. Maybe you can take it over lunchtime. But what I would urge that all those who are working in this area keep on doing this work. I think keep on advocating, and to add to your point, there is one more dimension, psychological, where I am representing, which is we call our emotional maturity. When is the time when you can take a decision? And of course brain is also developing, like something known as prefrontal cortex, like as we know that young people are more impulsive because the amygdala is the one center which is responsible for that, whereas mature people, where they have developed brain which is there. So the important thing is that we have to think from that aspect, but at the same time we all know more than 50% of the cases are actually of the consensual sex which are there in the court, which again we all know from psychological point of view, that is also very important, where it's a part of growing up, as a part of development process. And so one has to strike a balance. I think Argument will go either way, whether to reduce what the age should be, but it goes just beyond the legal perspective. I completely agree, and we have to see that how we can work on it in the future. And at the end, I would thank Indian Council of World Affairs and all the team who are there, and it was a treat to listen to everyone, and we hope that we continue this process. Back to you, Avni. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, speakers, for the diverse perspective on age of consent. Now we will break for lunch. Please be back in your seats by 1 p.m. Thank you.